welcome to the first ever podcast episode of the Pure Hearted Podcast. I am so excited. Now, if you know me, IRL, you know that I've been talking about doing this for a long time, but haven't because I'm a procrastinator, and then let's mix that with a little bit of warfare and then a little bit of perfectionism, waiting for the right moment to do the right thing, and all of it to come together at the right time. So it's finally happening. The Lord gave me a dream of my procrastination, and it woke me right out of my sleep, and I felt like He said, come film this now. It's like 3 a.m. I'm up recording this. I don't have a tripod. I don't have a camera. All I have is my phone. So it was a little bit of a struggle to try to get this set up. I'm praying that the Lord works His magic on the end, that He will just shift and align everything. But so I want to go into the dream, and then I want to go into what I feel the Lord has said He's looking for: people who will yield. First off, the dream, I'm going to do the real short and simple version of it. In this dream, I am working the off shift at my work. And at my work, there are these two ladies there, and they're asking me if I've ever had this new restaurant. And I'm like, no, I've never had it. And they're talking about how, the food there is so good, you have to try it. And they somehow convince me into picking up, or maybe I offered even, to picking up this steak that they ordered from this place. So I come back with their food, and they pull out, like, the food looks good, that was her lunch though, so she's eating it, and all of a sudden, instead of eating the food I had brought, that she bought, she starts eating my foot. Okay, and I know it's such a silly, goofy little dream, but it was not a silly, goofy word when I woke up. So before I tell you what I feel the Lord gave me the interpretation of that on, so after, like, I dream in like bits, kind of. So that part of the dream happened, and then we shift to this next part. It's me and my little sister in this room, and something is trying to torment me and keep me from waking up, kind of, but I'm already up. It's like, kind of like sleep paralysis, but I'm dreaming about sleep paralysis. And then my little sister is next to me, and she's just out cold. And I'm trying so hard to, like, wake her up, but something's fighting her from waking up. And I finally, after, like, smacking her around a couple times, I finally get her up. And so now she's up with me, right? And we're like, bro, we have to somehow, I don't know really what the plan was to do after that, but we both knew we had to do something about it. And somehow we were able to get out of the bed, but now we're in the corner. And I'm speaking against whatever enemy was at this door. And I'm sorry, I talk with my hands. I'm speaking against the enemy that's at the door, trying to shut me up. Like, my sister doesn't yet have a voice, but I'm using my voice to come against this enemy. And it says something along the lines like, basically, shut up to me. And I'm like, I will not shut up. And it was just a wild dream. This one, I believe the Lord allowed me to go through to see what actually I'm doing. And so when I woke up, I felt the Lord speak to me that I have began to feed myself to the enemy by my disobedience of not posting this sooner. That every time I get to a place of wanting to post this, or, saying yes, deciding, and then going back on that, I'm literally feeding into the plan of the enemy. His plan is to devour me, and it's like I'm just giving him my foot so he can just go ahead and, eat the transportation that gets me there, And so I was reflecting back on the dream, like, not only did somehow either I offered to go and pick up this food, or he convinced me to go pick up this food, thinking I'm going on some different type of trip, only to when I come back, he's actually feasting on me. and he's not feasting on the food that he said was so good that I have to try. No, he's actually trying to eat me, and obviously not very literally, but actually, he roams about like a roaring lion. He roams about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. That's the word, you know? And so the Lord was basically telling me that he's looking to devour me and I'm just letting him, you know? And so that was the very first interpretation, and I feel like the first interpretation of the first clip of my dream, and then the second clip to be awakening people who are sleeping with my voice because they don't yet have a voice. They actually don't even know they're asleep. It was like my sister didn't know she was sleeping until she woke up and realized she was sleeping. If that makes any sense. So I woke up, one, praying against the devourer of the enemy, also repenting. Please forgive me, Jesus, that I'm being disobedient in doing this, and in my disobedience, I'm feeding myself to the enemy. And a lot of times I know that we like to blame Satan for attacking us, but are we actually just feeding ourselves to the enemy because we are not doing the things the Lord has asked us to do? So that's where I was with that first clip of the dream, and then the second interpretation, I think, being that one of my jobs is to awake those who are sleeping and use my voice to come against the words of the enemy, but through love. It was because of my love for my sister that I wanted to wake her up so that she was not tormented here by whatever this enemy was. So that's literally one of the visions of this podcast, as well as to extend the love of Jesus, teach people that Jesus is love and that he loves us. And another thing I feel the Lord said was, this generation is seeking love. It's just seeking love in the wrong places. It's aching. It wants to be loved. It wants to belong, and it is craving a love and affection. And the only satisfaction of that will come from Jesus Christ himself. You won't be able to find love anywhere else. That's true, and that has stood the test of time, literally. And that only comes from Jesus. And so as I get into my message, very simple, very short message, and it is that he's looking for people who will yield. And the example he gave me was Abram. And it's Genesis 12. I'll read a little bit of it real quick. So Genesis 12, this is the NLT version. It is, the Lord said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. And so I say all this to say is that I feel we often don't take into account the heaviness and weightiness of the decision Abram had on his back for a man at 75 years old who has probably never had to yield any of his desires. If he wanted it, he got it. Abram is 75 years old, and the Lord asks him to yield over what he thought the trajectory of the rest of his life was going to look like, and follow him to a land that Abram can't scope out before him. Abram can't GPS it and see what's near it. Abram can't see if it's lakeside, beachfront, or if it's countryside with mountains. Abram can't see what this land is like, and he doesn't even have the name of this land. He is just trusting that the relationship he has with God is a man of his word and will take him to a land that is actually there. And another thing is, along the way, it's trusting that God, when he is to leave, will God get him there to this land safely, and will He doesn't. It's the whole process of not knowing what it's going to look like, not knowing where you're actually going to end up, but it's trusting that if God asked you to do this, that He knows you and knows the desires you have, and that He is a good God and a good Father, that He will give a good gift to you, that He wouldn't lead you to this land that, like, because that's just the goodness of God, is it might not be all roses and rainbows and daisies, but He knows you enough to, there's going to be satisfaction in Him and the desires of your heart because you're in Him. And I feel like that is a big thing, is our desires. Delight yourself in the Lord and He will give you the desires of your heart. It's when we delight ourselves in the Lord, it's when we are abiding in Him and Him in us, where we will take on the desires of Him that He has for us, that we're allowing His plan to be the only plan that we're trying to follow, because we often use Jesus as a step to what we desire. We use Jesus as something to catapult us up into what we want. We'll let Jesus be, what's the word I'm looking for? We are not satisfied anymore with Jesus. He has become a stepping stone into the ministry we want. Jesus has become a way to get to, it's Jesus has no longer become the full encompassing, most important foundational. He's no longer, how do I want to say this, Lord? I said it. Jesus has become a stepping stone to the ministries that we want. Jesus has become a stepping stone in a way to get into the industries we want to get into. Jesus has become this bridge to get us to the places we want to go. Jesus is no longer enough for us, but we are able to use Him if we do it the right way. And I feel like it's often this walk has become in America, is we're asking God to yield His plans that He has for us so that we might accomplish things that are so temporary. But if we allow God to ask us to yield, it can have an everlasting impact. So through this decision Abraham has to make, the whole lineage of the Messiah is depending upon it. So if we think about and I feel like that's what the Bible tells us to be, heaven minded, to have eternity on our mind. The decisions we are making here on earth, we're thinking earthly minded. We're thinking of how can this impact the earth, and not how can we impact heaven with this decision. We aren't thinking kingdomly anymore. We're thinking of, what can I get? One, instant gratification right now. And if we are a slave to flattery and human, acceptance, we're thinking, how can we get these things right now? And that's not at all what being heavenly minded, eternity minded is. It is, though it may look like it's not doing anything right now, will I continue to do it? Will I continue to yield? Will I continue to be obedient and store up treasures in heaven? We don't want to show up to heaven bankrupt. We don't want to get there and be like, you never invested a thing here, girl. Because then what was it all for? Was that little bit of human adoration worth it? Was that little bit of flattery worth it? Was the platform and speaking at that conference for 27 minutes worth it? Was disobeying the Lord and His word to yield and go to a land that you do not know worth it? Was it worth it to only show up to heaven bankrupt? So we have a decision before us, and it is, will we yield to the Lord and His ways and His plans, because they are better than ours? In our pride, we may think, yeah, right, but they truly are. He is the only thing that can satisfy. He knows us from the inside and out. And that's another thing about the pure heart, is blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they shall see God. Having a pure heart doesn't mean you have a perfect heart. But having a pure heart means that we keep bringing this before the Lord, asking Him to set ablaze in it what is not of Him, but to also set our hearts ablaze for Him. It's a constant wringing out of the sin of our heart, sin in our heart, because the heart is deceitful above all things, and it's asking us to place more of Jesus in our hearts. Because purity means to be made of mostly up of one thing. We want our hearts to be made up of one thing, and that is Jesus. That is the mission of this podcast, is that after you listen to it, your heart is more full of Jesus. Your heart is more burning for Jesus. Your heart is burned and convicted of the sin that still lies in you, still lies in me, but it's saying, it's not backing down in shame, but it's bringing your heart before God and saying, God, I recognize this in my heart. I want to wring it out and replace it with more of you. That's the whole purpose. But we have to start with obedience and submission and surrender. And all the other words that we don't like, because it means I'm not doing what I want when I want it. It's, you can't trust yourself. You can't trust on the job. You can't trust on your family. It's, you have to put your trust in God alone and trust that you heard Him and then walk it out. So that is the decision that we have in front of us today, that I have in front of me today, and that is to yield to the Lord and trust that His ways are better, His ways are higher, His thoughts are higher. And that we will do what He asks us to do. Because He's good. Because He loves us. Because He died for us. Because He is enough. We don't need any more of ourselves. You know, it is, He must increase, I must decrease. We have it all backwards. We're in this antichrist, world, antichrist culture. He says, whoever shall be first must be last. But if you want, it is, whoever is greatest must be the least. We must be servants to our brothers and sisters. We must be humble and meek like Jesus. That's the only way. We are walking around so prideful and full of ourselves, and then wondering why we're stuck in the same cycles over and over again, because we don't like to be cut. We don't like, now I am tired of spiritual lingo, but I'm tired of more of how life is always perfect and there's never any suffering. But we also don't like the spiritual lingo of being cut, refinement. If the word is sharper than any two-edged sword, cutting between bone and marrow, that's a precise cutting. We don't want to be cut no more. We like to be full of ourselves. And that's the problem. But if we will yield to the Holy Spirit, if we will yield to Jesus, if we will yield our desires, and this is like the goodness of God, and I keep saying that, we will find what we were desiring in the place He's taking us to anyway. Because he creates new things out of nothing, God loves to surprise us. God loves to take us through the most unlikely ways to get to this place where we get what we were ultimately desiring anyway. I just want to conclude with, if the Lord is asking you to yield, I pray that you yield. I pray that it doesn't take you almost 2 years to do what the Lord has asked you to do. I pray that when He says it, you just do it. I pray that if He's asked you to create something, you create it. If He asks you to start something, you start it. I pray that you would not hold your gifts back and sit on your talents, but that you would do what the Lord asked you to do. I pray that we would be a generation who seeks God like no other, who listens to God like no other, who yields to God, who puts Him first. More of Him, less of us. Amen.